Hello all, my name is Roseanne Stachowiak and I am here to read to you an excerpt from my latest book, Fall from Grace. Fall from Grace is a historical fiction novel set during the Salem witch trials of 1692. This is as historically accurate as I could possibly make it, considering some of the records have disappeared, probably due to fire or just old age. Without further ado, I will read you an excerpt. Low embers from a soot-darkened fireplace kept the two-room apartment above the bakery warm. A sturdy table sat in the middle of the room and had an oil lamp at the center of it. A half-full pitcher of beer sat next to the lamp. Bowls of half-eaten stew surrounded the table. A partially sliced loaf of bread glowed in the lamplight. Grace, her parents, and her younger brother Nazareth sat around the table. "Grace, your mother has agreed to take your place at the bakery tomorrow after church," he declared. "Surely there is no need, Father. The bakery on a Sunday is slow enough day to work. Besides, I can catch up with my friends when business is slow," Grace reasoned. "Any other Sunday, and I would agree with you, Grace. However, young Mr. Milson has asked to court you. I feel that if you were to spend some time with him in the Commons, then it is possible for you to love him. If you are amenable, that is," Grace finished with a slow smile on her wind-blown face. The glowing smile on Grace's face matched the lamp in the center of the table as she chirped, "If God wills it, then that would be a most welcome outcome. Then I shall tell Mr. Milson that you would be glad to spend the afternoon with him under the watchful eye of Reverend Parris," her father informed with a hint of humor. Grace blushed in the lamplight and turned to face her mother while gratefully expressing, "Mother, I thank you for this joyous opportunity." "Thank me not, Grace. Thank the Lord, for he would see us all happy. Besides, I remember what it's like to be a young girl," her mother finished with hope as a loud rapping sounded at the door. "Who would be calling at this hour that the Lord reserves for family and prayer?" Father asked as he rose to answer the door. Grace and her mother shared a fearful look as Father crossed the little room. "Mother, why would people call in the evening when the Lord says that this is family time?" Nazareth asked from his seat. "I don't know, my son. Surely no good can come from breaking this command, though," Mother answered calmly as she reached out a hand to grasp either of her children. While Father blocked the open door, the family sat and waited with almost bated breath, hands entwined. Callers in the evening were unheard of. Most people needed their rest from morning, as the sun seemed to rise earlier each day. Church and work were all important to the people of Salem town. Before another word could be said, the family heard Father unbelievably exclaim, "There must be some mistake. My children would never gamble with such a fate so dark. We're a God-fearing family." The lamp flickered in the chill wind that followed his voice. A deep rumbling could be heard as Father was seen to bow his head in submission. Father stepped to the table, admitting a stocky man with dried stains on his breeches and iron manacles in his hand. His looming silhouette blended with the shadows, creating a monstrous form in the lamp glow. The man walked over to the table and roughly grabbed Grace by the shoulder, causing her to cry out in pain. In a low, cold voice, he harshly stated, "Grace Bacon, you are hereby charged with the treasonous crime of witchcraft." As the man finalized his statement, he roughly pulled Grace from her chair and away from her mother, and while placing a heavy iron manacles around her wrists. Grace looked at her father with wide, wet eyes. "Father, I swear with God as my witness, I've had no dealings with a creature as foul as the devil." As the man was pulling her from the room, tears ran down Mother's smudged cheeks, while Nazareth sat there with his jaw open, wider than a horse's hoof. Father hung his head in shame as he replied, "We raised you with God, Grace. How could you have dealings with such a creature as the devil is beyond my mortal soul," Father told her scornfully. "Father, as God is my witness, I did not do this," Grace pleaded. once more as she was forcefully dragged into the chilly night air. She could hear her mother's tears as the door slammed shut. The sheriff practically shoved her down the icy wooden stairs, causing Grace to stumble into an uncovered waiting wagon. He then climbed in behind Grace, shackled her to the other woman in the wagon. Grace found herself seated next to two other women. Both had gray hairs sticking out from their bonnets and lines carved into their faces. On one side of the wagon sat a pregnant and bitter-looking Mrs. Good. The opposite held pale Mrs. Osborne. Both women had tears straining their confusion-etched faces. Their shoulders were bowed and skirts were torn and stained. Once the shackles were tightened, the sheriff jumped out of the wagon and headed to the front. Within moments, he was driving the cold wagon north to the north side of town. As the wagon started to move, Grace gingerly sat next to Mrs. Good. The woman muttered harshly under her breath, causing Grace to wrap her arms tightly around herself. Bowing her head, Grace closed her eyes and began to silently recite psalms from the Bible she had read since a child. Surely faith would help her on this bitter night. It was all she had left at this point. As the wagon bounced along the bumpy road, Grace hit her head on the covered back of the wagon, causing her to cry out in pain more than once. The cold night air blew through the wagon as though it wasn't there, causing gooseflesh to rise on exposed skin. Crinkled foreheads, clenched cheeks, with blue-tinted lips, hid from the windy opening of the wagon. The three women held themselves upright and their hands braided in prayer as though asking God to help them during this miserable time. While Grace was lost in her prayers, the wagon came to a jarring halt. The two burly men in dark clothes rushed into the back of the wagon and loosened their shackles. One of them furiously spat, "Out, you foul creatures!" The dark tone in which they were ordered saw all three women flinch in their seats. Rough hands grabbed Grace by the shoulders and yanked her out of the wagon, causing her to land on her knees. As tears leaked out of Grace's eyes, she cried out, "Ow! You'll get no pity from me, witch!" One of the men spat scornfully. As tears streamed down Grace's face, she looked from where she'd fallen onto scraped knees and stated, "I am no more a witch than your mother is." The guard turned an angry shade of red as he towered over her. As the guard yanked on Grace's arm, she cried out once more. "My mother walks with God," he snarled as spittle came flying out of his mouth, hitting Grace in the face. "She would be ashamed to know that you are treating a woman of God in this manner," Grace argued back as she tried to free her arm from the guard's tight grip. "A witch has no place at God's side," the guard spat in her face. Grace opened her mouth to retort, only to feel a sharp pain where the guard's hand struck her face. Standing in shock, Grace felt a gentle hand on the small of her back. "It's not worth it at the moment, girl. If these people want the devil to confuse them, they are more godless than they accuse us," Sarah Good whispered. Grace flinched at the often sour woman's voice, but did as she advised. And that, dear readers, is the end of chapter 2. I hope you have been entranced in this novel as much as I had when writing it. So until next time, happy reading.